Welcome back to Creative Excuses, where we are using ESO to get the creative juices flowing. We're back with another build video, this time for ESO's newest class, the Arcanist. This new class, which drops today, is incredibly powerful and fun to play, capable of clearing the hardest solo content in the game with fantastic scores, and if you're feeling really spicy, it can clear even some veteran 4-man content as long as you know the mechanics. Check out these videos on the screen if you want to see the Arcanist in action from the public test server, and I'll have more videos coming out from the live server as soon as I manage to level my own Arcanist. For the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through the major mechanics of the class and how this build uses them to the fullest to become one of the most powerful 1-bar Arcanist builds that you'll see on patch day. Before we jump in, remember, I don't put every detail of the build in these videos. For that, check out the link in the description to ESO Hub, where I host all of my written builds with all of the details that you need to get set up and running with your own version of this Arcanist. Let's jump into it. The Arcanist is a wild new class that feels unlike any other class added to the game so far. Its most powerful form actually feels closer to a low action per minute heavy attack build than a traditional light weaving build, which is really fun and very comfortable to play. If you have hand pain like me, the Arcanist is a fantastic class to play. As the new class, we're all still learning about it, but as I've played it on the PTS, I think there are 3 main features that characterize the Arcanist and give it a unique feeling and strength. Let's start with the most obvious feature. The Arcanist's signature skill is super cool. It's the first truly aimed skill in the game, behaving a lot like a first or third person shooter in a way, with you able to aim the beam where you want your damage to go. It really is point and shoot, which also means that you can aim it at the ground and do nothing with it, so be careful. Its radius is pretty massive though, so that helps, and it is a lot of fun to use. However, on its own, the beam is actually quite a weak ability. Let's look at its tooltips compared to a similar skill, biting jabs. These tooltip numbers are from ESO Hub, with the note that all of the tooltip values are from an empty level 50 character with equal stats and I believe no passives or champion points. That way, the skills are easily comparable for their baseline damage. On its face then, biting jabs actually deals more damage per second than either morph of Fate Carver per second, because both the biting jabs tooltip is higher and its channel time is less than 1 second, meaning you can weave light attacks in. During the 4-second channel of Fate Carver or Pragmatic Fate Carver, the skill only deals 12 to 13 ticks of its tooltip. Meanwhile, biting jabs gets 12 ticks of its tooltip, plus 4 light attacks, which is a significant amount of damage. Exhausting Fate Carver has the same problem because the damage comes out of the skill at the same speed as Pragmatic Fate Carver, but just allows you to channel longer. So Fate Carver sucks then, right? It just deals less damage than jabs, which isn't even the best spammable in the game anymore. No, actually, Fate Carver is incredibly strong, and that is because it interacts so well with the second main feature of the class, Crux. Crux is the Arcanist's unique class mechanic that heavily rewards using class skills to do things. It's the equivalent of the corpse mechanic that necromancers use for a lot of their skills, but instead of leaving something on the floor, you get these cool floaty green things around you. You can stack up to 3 Crux using skills that generate Crux. You can then either let that Crux sit there and benefit from them passively from skills like the passive Healing Tides or the morphs of Runic Jolt, or you can spend them on Crux spending skills for extra effects like extra damage, healing, or shielding. What really matters for our build here is how we are generating and spending our Crux. First, spending. Fate Carver is a fantastic skill only because the Crux spending mechanic exists. Each Crux spent on a Fate Carver of either morph increases the damage of the skill by 33%. That means if we spend 3 Crux, we double the damage of Fate Carver. That is insane. By casting Fate Carver fully Cruxed up, the skill suddenly becomes an absolute cannon, effectively firing out 2 full spammables worth of damage per second for either 4 or 5 seconds depending on the morph. For reference, a sticky 20-second long damage over time skill generally only does around 2 spammables worth of damage over its entire duration. Fate Carver is doing that much per second when cruxed up. This is really interesting as a mechanic though. Fate Carver's own damage is pretty mediocre, but when it is used to spend Crux, it makes this skill look disproportionately strong. Look at this parse from someone else who was testing DPS during the PTS. Look at how much damage is coming from this one skill. Except it's not. The damage is being extracted and applied by Fate Carver, yes, but half of that damage is actually coming from the Crux that has been generated, meaning that the Crux generating skills are actually responsible for a significant portion of that damage, more than Fate Carver actually is. Here's why. The shorter morph of Fate Carver takes 4 seconds to fully cast, and each Crux increases the damage by 33% or 1/3. 1/3 of 4 seconds is 1.32, meaning that every Crux generated is effectively storing the damage of 1.32 seconds of the damage from a 0 Crux 4-second Fate Carver. In other words, each Crux is worth 4 ticks of the Fate Carver tooltip for the 4-second morph. For the 5-second exhausting Fate Carver, you are effectively storing 1.65 seconds or 5 ticks of the Fate Carver tooltip. This means that when you cast a damaging skill that generates Crux, you are getting the damage, healing, or debuff from the skill, plus 4 or 5 ticks of Fate Carver damage. That is more damage, obviously, than just 1 second of Fate Carver that you cast in a single global cooldown. Fate Carver is not the highest damage skill that the class has, but it is how the class extracts the most possible damage from its core Crux mechanic. And it is how we are able to do such good damage using just a 1-bar build. As long as we can fit effective Crux generation into our build, we can extract an absolute ton of damage from that Crux. And we can definitely fit in plenty of Crux generation. We have 2 skills that are generating all of our Crux in this version of the build: Sophia Lark's Flail and Inspired Scholarship. These are both fantastic skills because they give us great passives and deal decent damage on their own, being an execute and kind of a weird damage over time skill, but they also generate Crux. The Flail generates Crux once per cast, and Inspired Scholarship generates Crux a maximum of 10 times, but more realistically, more like 7 or 8 times. Side note, that makes Inspired Scholarship deal an equivalent damage of 9 to 11 or 11 to 13 seconds of Fate Carver's tooltip damage, depending on the Fate Carver morph, in Crux generation alone, making it the strongest skill to cast for a single global cooldown in the entire Arcanist toolkit. That is the equivalent of casting 9 to 13 spammables worth of damage for just 1 global cooldown. Not even including the 7 to 8 ticks of damage that it actually deals on its own. With Inspired Scholarship up, our rotation then is very simple. Beam, Flail, Flail, Beam, Flail, Flail, Beam, etc. Recasting our buffs and dots when they're down between Fate Carvers, throwing in an ultimate when you have it, or when you want some burst damage, and that's it. That's the whole rotation, and it absolutely melts everything. But damage is only half of the battle when it comes to a solo build. We also need to stay alive, and that leads us to our last major class feature. Staying alive on a solo Arcanist is an interesting time. We do not have access to a strong self-healing damage skill like Puncturing Sweeps, Swallow Soul, Bloodthirst, or anything like that. We have a small self-heal on Sophia Lark's Flail that only scales with your stats, but not with Execute, not with enemies hit, nothing like that. And so we're going to use that a little bit, but because we're using the Beam for over half of our time in a fight, we can't use the Flail often enough to be a consistent heal. This lack of strong self-healing while dealing damage is a key feature and limitation of the class. However, we do have a few other options. The first has to do with our Crux generation. Even though the class does not have a strong healing over time, or strong healing while dealing damage, we do have a strong burst heal that has a small heal over time attached to it that synergizes well with crit healing. Evolving Rune Mend. Evolving Rune Mend heals 3 times in 1 quick burst, which means that it has 3 chances to crit heal. Though the average healing will be the same as if it was 1 tick of healing, it will more consistently heal higher than its tooltip, and less consistently give a massive heal as if it was a single tick that can crit. The floor for the crits is higher, but the ceiling is lower. However, more important than it being an effective heal with a small heal over time attached to it, it generates Crux, and as we learned, Crux generated is damage stored, and one cast of this skill is still worth more damage than when casting 1 second of the beam. So it can easily be worked into your rotation as your Crux generator. It will be less damage than casting a spammable there, but using this as my main heal and Crux generator, I was able to pull 300k in veteran Vodashran Hollows, which is still a really solid score. And that was before the class received a buff in the form of a shield on Pragmatic Fate Carver. And this is the real feature of the build. Arcanists may have relatively weak self-healing for solo builds, but they have incredible shielding. This shielding comes from 3 possible places for a good solo build. Pragmatic Fate Carver, which is a damage stat scaling shield, which is super strong. Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea, which gives a massive 60% damage reduction as long as the shield holds, or for 10 seconds. And the Arcanist passive Intricate Rune Forms, which buffs shield strength by 10%. That 10% isn't a ton, but combined with the Bastion champion point node, and suddenly Arcanist shields are unbelievably powerful. The tooltip for the shield on Pragmatic Fate Carver for me is 15k, while the tooltip for Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea is 67k. But Sanctum is only really necessary for fights with high damage phases, but not high damage all the time. Because of that, the build relies primarily on the Fate Carver shield and the small heal from the flail to keep itself up. But that is pretty risky. If that shield falls off while channeling, you either have to cancel to recast for a new shield with no new heals coming in, so your health is going to stay low, or you just might die. Because of that, and how often it can happen when you have 0 heals coming in while casting Fate Carver, the solo Arcanist makes excellent use of automatic damage shields like Ice Heart, which I'm using in the gameplay that you're seeing now, and my primary build. Hexos Ward also works really well and has a massive tooltip, and Parabellum, which is like Hexos Ward, has an insanely easy proc condition, and extra health and stamina if you need a little bit more general purpose stats than the purely damage stats on Hexos Ward. Any of these 3 sets, plus the other major survivability tools in the Arcanist toolkit, will help keep you up and fighting for a ton of content. As a side note, I also add in Structured Entropy from the Mages Guild during ad pulls in Vodashran to add just a little bit more healing, because otherwise there's no healing coming in while I'm grouping up the ads and sprinting, and that's kind of dangerous. The Arcanist may not have the best heals for soloing, but it does have enough survivability to plow through tons of solo and even some group content with brute force shielding. It is a lot of fun and shockingly tanky given the poor healing. So that is how the major features of the class work for a solo build. Build Crux, spend it on the beam, keep yourself alive with either evolving Rune Mend, damage shields, or in really spicy fights, both. The class is simple and an absolute blast to play. Remember, check the link in the description to see the full written build for this Arcanist, with all of the details needed to make your own incredibly powerful 1-bar Arcanist. If you liked the video, hit that button and subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you all in the next excuse.